It was a bright, busy morning in the city. The streets were alive with the usual sounds of traffic, car horns, and people hurrying to work or school. Among them, a man named James drove his usual bus route, stopping carefully at every corner and bus stop. James had been a bus driver for many years. He was known for his calm demeanor and gentle way with passengers. Everyone who rode his bus liked him because he treated each person with respect, whether it was a student, a businessman, or an elderly woman. James loved his job not because of the money, but because it gave him a chance to connect with people. He liked listening to their stories, seeing the smiles of children on the bus, and helping people reach their destinations safely. That morning, like many others, he had a long route ahead. He had just picked up a few passengers and was heading toward a crowded part of the city when something unusual caught his attention. Near a busy street corner, he noticed a small boy standing alone. The boy looked lost and frightened. He held a small backpack tightly against his chest and kept looking around, as if hoping someone would find him. James's heart immediately went out to the child. He slowed the bus and watched for a moment, trying to understand the situation. The boy did not seem to belong to anyone around. He was clearly scared, and the street was crowded and dangerous. Without thinking twice, James parked the bus safely and stepped down. "Hey there, buddy," he said gently, approaching the boy. The boy flinched at first but did not run. James knelt down to be at eye level. "Are you lost? Can you tell me your name?" The boy nodded slowly, but his voice was barely audible. I'm Ethan," he said. His eyes were wide, filled with worry. James smiled softly to try to reassure him. "It's okay, Ethan, you're safe now. My name is James. I'm going to help you find your family." Ethan looked up at him, still unsure, but something about James's calm presence seemed to comfort him. He didn't speak much after that, but he allowed James to take his hand. James felt a strong sense of responsibility. In that moment, it didn't matter how busy his day was, or how many stops he had to make on the route. This child needed help, and James was going to do everything he could to make sure he was safe. James first thought about calling the local authorities, but he knew it could take time for them to respond. He didn't want to leave the boy alone, even for a few minutes. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go inside this cafe. You can sit and we'll figure out what to do next." Ethan hesitated, but eventually followed him. Inside the cafe, James bought a small sandwich and some juice. "You must be hungry," he said kindly. The boy nodded and ate quietly. James tried to engage him in conversation to make him feel comfortable. "So, Ethan, do you remember where you were before you got lost?" Ethan shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. I don't know. I was playing, and then I don't know where I am," James understood. He had seen this kind of fear in children before. Losing one's way can be terrifying. "It's okay, Ethan, we'll find your family. You're not alone." While Ethan ate, James began thinking about the next steps. He needed to check if anyone nearby had seen the boy before. He walked around the cafe asking people if they knew the child, but no one recognized him. He returned to Ethan, who was now playing quietly with the small toy car he had found in his backpack. James felt a mix of concern and determination. This child was alone in a busy city and he had no idea where to go. James decided he would do what he could to keep him safe until someone came forward. "Ethan, do you remember anything about your home? Your parents? Where they live?" Ethan thought hard, then whispered, "Big house. And a man." "He's my dad," James nodded. That was at least a clue. "All right, buddy. We'll figure it out. I promise." He tried asking the people in the area again, describing the boy and asking if anyone had seen him with his family. Still, no one had. James didn't give up. He decided to take Ethan with him as he continued his route, hoping someone might recognize him. On the bus, he made sure Ethan sat comfortably, giving him a small blanket from his bus supplies. He noticed that the boy was still scared, holding onto the blanket tightly, but at least he was calm enough to stay quiet. As the morning went on, James stopped at every familiar shop asking questions, and making sure no one in the area had seen a child matching Ethan's description. At each stop, passengers noticed the boy and asked questions. James explained gently that the boy was lost and he was trying to help him. Many people offered assistance, giving small suggestions about where the boy might belong. While they moved through the city, James talked to Ethan softly, trying to keep him calm and distracted. "Do you like buses?" James asked with a smile. Ethan gave a tiny nod. "Good. You're on the best bus in the city right now. I make sure everyone gets home safely. And now you're safe with me too." Ethan's small hand tightened around James's fingers. He looked up and for the first time that morning seemed a little relieved. James realized that simple words and a little kindness could do so much for a scared child. Hours passed and still no one claimed the boy. James felt the weight of responsibility, but he refused to let fear or fatigue take over. He had made a promise to Ethan and he intended to keep it. He even called the local police, leaving a message that a lost child was with him, but he didn't want to wait for them to arrive. He couldn't leave Ethan alone in the cafe or on the street. As midday approached, James decided to try one last thing. He would go to the park where children often played, thinking perhaps Ethan had wandered from there. He parked the bus safely and walked with Ethan in his hand. The city streets were still busy, but James remained calm, showing confidence and care. When they reached the park, James asked Ethan if he recognized anything. The boy looked around, then pointed at a small fountain in the center. I was here," he whispered. James smiled gently. "Good, that's a start. Let's see if anyone knows you here." At the park, James asked people if they had seen Ethan with his family. No one had, but he remained patient. He knew that sometimes it took a while for the right person to appear. He sat on a bench with Ethan, letting him rest. They watched other children play, and slowly Ethan began to relax. James could see the tension leaving his small shoulders, replaced by curiosity and trust. James felt a sense of pride, but also humility. He was just a bus driver, a regular man, but in this moment he was someone's protector. He was making a difference in a child's life. He thought about how small acts of kindness could change the course of someone's day, or even their life. As the sun climbed higher, James continued to watch over Ethan, ready to respond if anything happened. He didn't know where this day would lead or who the boy's family was. He only knew one thing for sure: he would not leave Ethan's side until he was safe. And so, in the middle of a busy city, a simple bus driver and a scared little boy began an unexpected journey. One that would test patience, kindness, and humanity. James didn't know it yet, but this day would change both their lives forever. After sitting on the park bench for a while, James could see that Ethan was beginning to calm down. The initial fear in the boy's eyes had softened, replaced by a mix of curiosity and cautious trust. James didn't want to rush him or make him feel more scared, so he simply sat beside him, letting Ethan rest and observe the people around. "Do you want to tell me more about your big house?" James asked gently, trying to coax a little information without overwhelming the boy. Ethan hesitated. He looked down at his small shoes, tracing the cracks in the pavement with his finger. "It's really big. And there's a garden. And lots of rooms. I have my own room and toys." "Lots of toys," he whispered. James smiled softly. "Wow, that sounds amazing, Ethan. That helps a lot. Maybe we can find this big house and get you back to your family." Ethan's eyes lit up a little, but the worry didn't leave completely. James understood that this wasn't easy for the boy. He had been lost, alone, and in a confusing world full of strangers. James decided that the best way to help was to break the problem into small, manageable steps. "All right," James said, standing and offering his hand. "First, let's walk around the park a little and ask if anyone knows you or your family. Maybe someone has seen you before." Ethan took James's hand again, this time a little more confidently. Together they walked slowly through the park. James asked the people they passed if they had seen a small boy wandering alone. Most shook their heads, but a few offered kind words of encouragement. One elderly man even suggested checking near the city's main plaza, where families often gathered. James thanked him and made a mental note. As they walked, James tried to keep the mood light. "You know, Ethan," he said with a small smile, "you're very brave. Most kids would be crying or hiding, but you stayed calm with me. That's really something." Ethan looked up, a small smile forming on his lips. "I'm scared," he admitted quietly. "I know," James said gently, "and it's okay to be scared. But being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you keep going even when you are." The boy nodded slowly, taking in James' words. There was a comfort in knowing someone understood him, someone who was patient and kind. James felt a surge of warmth in his chest. It was moments like these that made his heart feel full, moments when helping someone really mattered. After a short walk, they reached the plaza. It was busier than the park. full of families, street performers, and people going about their day. James scanned the crowd carefully. He asked a few passers-by if they recognized Ethan or knew where his family might be. Still, no one had any information. James realized that it might take more than just asking around. He had to think strategically. He remembered that children often had routines or landmarks they recognized. "Ethan," he said softly, "do you remember any street you walked on recently? Or a store you visited? Anything?" Ethan thought for a moment. There was a fountain and a big tree. I like feeding the pigeons there," he said. James nodded. That was a useful clue. "Perfect. We'll go to the fountain and the big tree. Maybe someone there can help us." They walked together to the fountain, moving carefully through the crowds. Along the way, James noticed how Ethan sometimes hesitated, glancing nervously at the bustling city. He made sure to stay close, holding the boy's hand and offering small reassurances. When they reached the fountain, Ethan's face lit up with recognition. "Yes, here," he said, pointing excitedly. James smiled. "Great. Let's see if anyone knows you." They asked a few people near the fountain, but still no one recognized Ethan. James could see the boy's disappointment, and he knelt down beside him. "It's okay, Ethan. We're doing everything we can. We just have to keep trying." Ethan nodded, but his small hands clutched James's jacket a little tighter. James understood the boy's fear. Being lost in a city full of strangers was overwhelming for anyone, let alone a 7-year-old. He decided it was time to use another approach. "Ethan, do you have a phone or any way to contact your family?" he asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "No, I don't know the numbers. I just ran." James sighed softly. This was more complicated than he had hoped, but he refused to give up. "All right, then we'll find another way. We can go to the local police station. They have ways to find families. I'll be with you the whole time." "How does that sound?" Ethan nodded slowly, feeling a little safer knowing James would not leave him alone. They walked together toward the police station, navigating the city streets carefully. James made sure to keep Ethan calm, pointing out small things to distract him from the fear. They saw a street musician playing a guitar, and James encouraged Ethan to listen for a while. They watched pigeons pecking at crumbs on the sidewalk, and James let Ethan toss a few pieces of bread for them. Through these small moments, James saw a change in Ethan. The boy was still worried, but he was beginning to trust that someone was looking out for him. James knew that this trust was fragile and precious, and he was determined not to break it. When they arrived at the police station, James explained the situation to an officer. "This little boy is lost," he said. "I've been trying to find his family, but so far, no luck. He doesn't know his address and he doesn't have any contact information." The officer nodded, taking Ethan's details and starting to enter the information into the system. "Thank you for bringing him in safely," the officer said. "We'll make sure to do everything we can to locate his family." James smiled. "I just wanted to make sure he was safe. That's the most important thing." While the officer worked, James sat with Ethan in a waiting area. The boy seemed tired, but he still held onto James's hand. "You stayed with me," Ethan said quietly. "I did," James replied gently. "Because you needed someone, and I wanted to help." Ethan looked up, a small smile forming. "Thank you," he whispered. James felt a warmth in his heart. It wasn't about recognition or reward. It was about doing the right thing. Seeing Ethan safe, even for this moment, was enough. The officer finally returned with some news. "We're going to try to contact local networks and see if we can trace his family. In the meantime, do you have someone who can stay with him?" James nodded. "I'll stay. I promised him I wouldn't leave." The officer smiled. "That's very kind of you." "Thank you." Hours passed in the police station. James kept Ethan calm with small stories, jokes, and gentle conversation. He talked about the city, the bus routes, and even shared little anecdotes from his own childhood. Ethan began to laugh occasionally, and James could see that the boy was slowly regaining some sense of security. James realized that this experience, while stressful, was also deeply meaningful. It reminded him of the importance of kindness, patience, and human connection. Even in a city filled with strangers, one person could make a real difference. As evening approached, James felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The search for Ethan's family was still ongoing, but he had done everything he could to keep the boy safe and calm. Ethan, tired but content, leaned against James, trusting him completely. James knew that the day was far from over, and the boy's family was still out there somewhere. But in that moment, he felt a quiet satisfaction. He was helping someone who truly needed it, and that was all that mattered. The bond between James and Ethan had begun to grow, forged in the shared experience of fear, trust, and care. James didn't know the boy's family or who they were, but he knew one thing. He would not leave Ethan alone. Not now, not ever. And so their journey continued. Two strangers connected by circumstance, navigating the challenges of a big city with patience, courage, and a quiet hope that the boy's family would soon be found. The afternoon had slowly passed into early evening. James and Ethan were still at the police station, sitting in the small waiting area. Ethan had grown more comfortable, but his small hand still occasionally clutched James's sleeve, a silent reminder of his fear and dependence. James had tried to keep the boy occupied with little stories, gentle jokes, and questions about school and friends. He noticed that Ethan's smiles were more frequent now, and that the boy had started to relax. Just when James thought the day couldn't get more tense, a sleek black luxury car pulled up outside the police station. The car seemed out of place among the plain vehicles and taxis that filled the street. A sharply dressed man stepped out, looking around frantically, scanning the area as if searching for someone precious. James felt a small twinge of curiosity and caution. He didn't know who this man was, but something in his demeanor suggested urgency and concern. The man approached quickly, his eyes locking on Ethan immediately. "Ethan, there you are!" His voice was a mixture of relief and worry. Ethan's eyes widened. Recognition flashed across his face, and he ran forward without hesitation. "Dad," he shouted, throwing himself into the man's arms. James stepped back quietly, observing the reunion. The man's face softened as he hugged Ethan tightly, checking him over for any sign of injury or distress. It was clear that the boy had been dearly missed. After a long moment, the man looked up and noticed James standing nearby. His eyes narrowed slightly, a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Who are you?" the man asked, his voice polite but guarded. James straightened and smiled gently. "My name is James. I'm the bus driver who found Ethan wandering alone this morning. I've been keeping him safe until you arrived." For a moment, the man studied him. He was impeccably dressed, clearly someone of wealth and influence, but he didn't seem unkind. He looked down at Ethan, who had returned to James's side, holding his hand tightly. "You've been taking care of him?" the man asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. James nodded. "Yes, sir. He was lost and scared. I couldn't leave him alone." The man's expression softened slightly, though he still seemed a little uncertain. I don't know how to thank you. We've had security everywhere today, but somehow he wandered off. You kept him safe. I can't tell you how much this means to me." James shrugged modestly. "I didn't do anything special. I just wanted to make sure he was safe. That's the important part." Ethan looked up at James with wide eyes. I like James," he said softly. The man's eyes followed Ethan's gaze, and he seemed to understand immediately. He glanced back at James, a quiet respect forming in his expression. "I see," he said. "He trusts you. That's very important." "Thank you." James smiled again, feeling a quiet sense of fulfillment. It wasn't about money or recognition. It was about knowing that Ethan had been safe and cared for. That was reward enough. The man introduced himself properly. "I'm Mr. Thompson, Ethan's father." James's eyes widened slightly, but he maintained his calm demeanor. Ethan, clearly comfortable, clung to James's hand, showing that the bond they had formed was real and meaningful. Mr. Thompson invited James to sit and talk for a moment. "I want to understand what happened," he said, his voice more relaxed now. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen again." James explained everything, from the moment he saw Ethan alone to their walk through the city and finally arriving at the police station. He spoke calmly, focusing on keeping the boy safe and comfortable. He didn't exaggerate or boast. He simply recounted the events truthfully. Mr. Thompson listened attentively, nodding occasionally. There was a mixture of relief, admiration, and amazement on his face. He clearly hadn't expected that a bus driver, a complete stranger to his family, would take such care of his son. "You did more than just your duty," Mr. Thompson said finally. "You kept him safe and calm when he could have been frightened, hurt, or worse. You didn't hesitate, you cared." James felt a flush of humility. "I just did what anyone would do," he said softly. Mr. Thompson shook his head. No, not everyone would do this. Not in the city, not with so many distractions and responsibilities. You made a real difference in his life, and for that I'm grateful. Ethan, still holding James's hand, looked between the two men. I was scared, he admitted, his voice quiet. But James, he made me feel safe. James ruffled Ethan's hair gently. You were brave too, buddy, he said. You stayed calm and trusted me. That made my job easier. Mr. Thompson smiled. There was a moment of silence as he looked at Ethan and then at James. You know, he said thoughtfully, Ethan talks about people he trusts very carefully. For him to say that, it means a lot. It tells me you're special. James felt a warmth in his chest, but he remained humble. He knew that he had acted out of instinct and care, not to receive praise or reward. Still, he couldn't help but feel proud that Ethan felt safe with him. I want to do something for you, Mr. Thompson said after a pause. It doesn't have to be anything big. But I want you to know that your kindness will not be forgotten. James shook his head politely. I don't need anything, sir. I'm just glad he's safe. Mr. Thompson studied him for a moment. You really are a good man, he said. That's rare these days. Ethan's safety and happiness. You've done more than I can put into words. Ethan looked up at James and smiled shyly. I like him, he said again. James smiled back. I like you too, Ethan, he said softly. The moment was quiet but meaningful. It was more than a reunion. It was the acknowledgement of trust, care, and humanity. James realized that sometimes the simplest acts of kindness could have the deepest impact. He had only wanted to keep a child safe, but the outcome went far beyond what he had imagined. Mr. Thompson spent the next hour talking to James, learning more about his life, his work, and the challenges he faced. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions without judgment, showing respect for the man who had cared for his son. James, in turn, spoke honestly and openly, sharing his experiences with humility and warmth. As the conversation continued, Mr. Thompson began to understand the depth of James' character. He realized that this was a man who cared not for fame, recognition, or wealth, but simply for doing the right thing. He could see that Ethan's trust in James was not superficial. It was real, earned through patience, empathy, and consistent care. Finally, Mr. Thompson stood, offering a hand to James. I cannot thank you enough, he said. You've done something extraordinary today. I want you to know that if you ever need anything at all, you can come to me. Not out of obligation, but because you deserve it. James shook his hand firmly, feeling a quiet sense of pride. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. But really, I'm just glad he's safe. Ethan, holding both of their hands, looked up with a big smile. Can James come visit sometimes? He asked. Mr. Thompson looked at James, then back at his son. Of course, he said warmly. I would be happy for him to visit. You've earned a place in our lives, James. James felt a lump in his throat. It was not the money or recognition that touched him. It was the genuine warmth and trust extended to him and the bond he had formed with Ethan. For the first time that day, he allowed himself to feel the full weight of the gratitude and love around him. As the evening settled in, James, Ethan, and Mr. Thompson walked out of the police station together. Ethan ran ahead for a moment, then came back holding James's hand. It was a small, simple gesture, but it spoke volumes about trust and connection. James realized that the day had changed all of them. For Ethan, it was a return to safety and family. For Mr. Thompson, it was a lesson in humility and the kindness of strangers. And for James, it was a reminder that even ordinary people could make extraordinary differences in the lives of others. As they parted ways, Mr. Thompson turned to James once more. You've done something remarkable, he said. Never forget it. You've touched our lives in ways I cannot fully explain. James nodded, smiling quietly. I won't forget. Thank you for trusting me with him. And with that, James watched as Ethan and his father walked toward their luxurious car, a sense of peace settling over him. He knew that this was more than just a lost child being found. It was a story of trust, compassion, and the human connections that could bridge worlds. After the reunion at the police station, James and Ethan had become quiet companions on the walk to the Thompson family car. Ethan's small hand stayed in James's grasp, a silent testament to the trust and bond that had formed over the day. James noticed how the boy would glance up at him every few moments, as if checking to make sure he was still there. James understood that gesture perfectly. In a world where things had gone frighteningly wrong just hours before, that simple reassurance mattered more than words. Mr. Thompson opened the car door for Ethan, but the boy hesitated. He looked at James almost as if he didn't want the day to end. I like James, he said softly. James crouched slightly to meet the boy's eyes. And I like you, Ethan. You've been brave today. You kept going even when things were scary. That's something very special. Ethan smiled faintly, the tension in his shoulders easing a little. Mr. Thompson watched this exchange carefully, clearly touched by the connection between the two. You've done more than I could have expected, Mr. Thompson said to James, and I want to make sure you know how grateful I am. What you did today, it's not something everyone could do. You didn't just help my son. You showed kindness, patience, and real care. James shook his head modestly. I didn't do it for thanks or rewards. I just wanted to make sure he was safe. That's all that mattered. Mr. Thompson studied him closely, a thoughtful look crossing his face. That's what makes it remarkable, he said quietly. Most people would hesitate, think about what's convenient, or assume someone else would help. You didn't. You acted with heart. James felt a warmth in his chest, but didn't let it show too openly. He had always believed that actions spoke louder than words, and hearing recognition for something he considered normal didn't change that. Still, the sincere gratitude in Mr. Thompson's voice made him realize the depth of what had happened that day. As they reached the car, Ethan finally let go of James's hand, stepping carefully inside. James watched him, and the boy turned briefly, waving shyly. Bye, James, he said softly. See you soon, buddy, James replied, forcing a small smile as he waved back. He knew this day had formed a bond that wouldn't easily fade. Mr. Thompson gestured for James to follow. I'd like you to come with us for a moment, he said. James hesitated slightly, unsure if it was appropriate, but curiosity and politeness won over. They walked together to the driveway of the Thompson residence, a place James had never imagined he would set foot. The house was enormous, elegant, and surrounded by lush gardens. It was a world apart from the streets James navigated every day. Yet despite its grandeur, the warmth in Ethan's eyes made the house feel less intimidating. Mr. Thompson opened the door and led James inside. Please make yourself comfortable, he said. James followed, taking in the spacious rooms, the soft lighting, and the careful attention to detail. Yet even in this wealth, he didn't feel out of place because the atmosphere was welcoming, not pretentious. Ethan ran ahead, eager to show James his room. James chuckled quietly, allowing the boy his moment. Watching Ethan's excitement, he was reminded why the day had been so important. This wasn't just about finding a lost child. It was about ensuring that the boy felt safe, loved, and respected in a world that suddenly seemed so vast and intimidating. Mr. Thompson led James to a comfortable sitting area. I want to talk with you, he said. I want to understand your life, your story, and how you've spent today with my son. It matters to me that someone like you is part of Ethan's life, even briefly. James nodded, feeling a mix of humility and quiet pride. I don't have much to tell, sir, he said. I've been a bus driver for years. I like helping people. That's why I do what I do. That's more than enough, Mr. Thompson replied. People like you are rare. Your work is simple, but your heart, that's extraordinary. You gave my son safety when everything else failed. That is not something that can be measured by money or position. James felt a lump in his throat. He had always believed that kindness should be quiet, unnoticed. But hearing it acknowledged in such a genuine way was moving. I saw a boy who needed help, he said quietly. I couldn't leave him. Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, studying James thoughtfully. And in doing so, you've made an impact that goes far beyond today. Ethan trusts you. He sees you as someone who cares. That trust, that bond, it's priceless. I can't express how much that means to me as a father. James nodded, understanding the weight of those words. Trust and safety were not things to be taken lightly, especially for a child. He had seen firsthand how fear could overwhelm a young mind, and he knew that small gestures of care could mean the difference between terror and calm. Ethan returned from his room, holding a small toy he wanted to show James. Look, I made a spaceship, he exclaimed, beaming with pride. James smiled warmly. That's amazing, Ethan. You're very talented. Mr. Thompson watched this exchange quietly, a smile on his face. He could see the genuine connection, the way James encouraged and respected the boy. It was clear that this was no ordinary interaction. It was a relationship built on honesty, care, and mutual respect. After a while, Mr. Thompson spoke again. "James, I know you didn't do this for recognition or reward, but I want to offer something. I want to show my gratitude in a way that reflects how much your actions mattered. Not because you need it, but because you deserve it." James shook his head politely. "I appreciate it, sir, but I don't need anything. Really, I'm glad Ethan is safe and happy." Mr. Thompson smiled, understanding his humility. "I insist. Even if it's something small, it's important to me that you know your actions are valued." James felt a quiet warmth in his chest. It wasn't about the material reward. It was about being recognized for something meaningful. He realized that this gesture was about human connection, about acknowledging care and courage in a world that often overlooked such qualities. Ethan tugged gently at James's sleeve. Can you stay for dinner?" he asked softly. James looked at Mr. Thompson, who nodded with a kind smile. "Of course. You're welcome here any time, James." James felt a wave of gratitude. Sharing a meal, talking, and spending time together would not just be a gesture of thanks. It would be a continuation of the bond he had formed with Ethan. It was a reminder that kindness and care could transcend social boundaries, bringing people together in unexpected ways. Over dinner, James listened as Ethan's father told stories of Ethan's earlier adventures, family trips, and daily life. James shared stories from his own life as well, focusing on lessons learned, humorous moments, and experiences that shaped him. Ethan laughed at James's anecdotes, occasionally interjecting with questions or comments. It was a simple human interaction, full of warmth and connection. Throughout the meal, James noticed something important. Despite the wealth and privilege surrounding him, the family treated him with genuine respect, not condescension. They valued his presence, his perspective, and most importantly, his care for Ethan. It was a reminder that true respect comes from understanding and appreciation, not status or power. As the evening drew to a close, Mr. Thompson took James aside. "I want you to know, James, that what you did today will not be forgotten. Not by me, not by Ethan. You've shown something rare, kindness, patience, and courage. That matters more than anything else in the world." James nodded quietly, feeling the weight of those words. "Thank you, sir. That means a lot." "But really, I just did what I had to do," Mr. Thompson smiled warmly. "And that is exactly what makes it extraordinary." Ethan, tired but content, leaned against James one last time before heading to bed. "Good night, James," he whispered. "Good night, buddy," James replied softly. He knew that this day had changed all of them. For Ethan, it was a reminder of safety and trust. For Mr. Thompson, it was a lesson in humility and the power of simple human kindness. And for James, it was proof that even ordinary people could make extraordinary differences in the lives of others. As he left the house that evening, James felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. The day had been exhausting, emotional, and challenging, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. He had acted with care, and that care had ripple effects that reached far beyond what he could see. Walking back into the quiet city streets, James realized that life had a way of connecting people in unexpected ways. One simple act of kindness, helping a lost child, had created a bond that would last a lifetime. It was a reminder that compassion, patience, and courage could bridge worlds, build trust, and change lives in ways that no one could predict. James took a deep breath, looking up at the city lights. He felt proud, not because of recognition, but because he had stayed true to his values. And in that moment, he understood something profound. Every small act of care, every moment of patience, and every gesture of human kindness could leave a mark on the world, far beyond what anyone could imagine. Days turned into weeks after the unforgettable day when James had helped Ethan find his way home. Even though life in the city moved quickly and the streets were always crowded, James felt a quiet change in his world. Something that had started as a simple act of kindness had grown into a connection that went far beyond anything he could have imagined. Ethan's father, Mr. Thompson, had kept in touch, not with grand gestures or excessive offers, but with simple, meaningful acts that showed appreciation and care. He had called James a few times, asking how he was, sharing little updates about Ethan, and inviting James to family events where the boy could feel comfortable and happy. It was clear that he valued James not just as someone who had helped his son, but as someone who had earned a place in their lives. For James, life had not changed in terms of routine. He still drove the bus every day, still greeted his passengers with a smile, and still listened to their stories with the same patience he always had. But there was a subtle difference now. He carried with him a sense of fulfillment, a quiet confidence that came from knowing he had made a real, lasting impact on someone's life. One morning, while making his usual rounds, James noticed Ethan waiting at a stop along his route. The boy's small backpack was slung over one shoulder, and he waved eagerly when he saw James. The bus pulled up and Ethan climbed aboard, a broad smile on his face. "Good morning, Ethan," James called, greeting him warmly. "Good morning, James," Ethan replied enthusiastically, finding a seat near the front. He looked around, curious but mostly focused on James. "I got a new drawing kit. Can we draw later?" he asked. James chuckled softly. "Of course. But first, let's get you where you need to go safely." As the bus moved along the familiar route, James noticed other passengers giving Ethan small smiles or greetings. It was clear that word had spread about the boy and the bus driver who had helped him when he was lost. But James paid little attention to the whispers. He was more focused on Ethan's laughter, the easy way the boy had begun to trust him, and the bond that had formed between them. When they reached Ethan's stop, Mr. Thompson was waiting, looking both relieved and happy. Ethan ran to his father, but before fully letting go, he looked back at James and waved. James waved back, a small smile tugging at his lips. Later that day, James received a call from Mr. Thompson. "James, we'd like to invite you over this weekend," he said warmly. "Just a small gathering. We'd love for Ethan to spend time with you outside of the bus. It's important to him. And to us." James hesitated briefly. He was not used to being invited into a life so different from his own, but the sincerity in Mr. Thompson's voice encouraged him. I'd be happy to," he replied. That weekend, James arrived at the Thompson residence. Ethan ran to greet him immediately, full of energy and excitement. The boy's laughter echoed through the large house, filling every room with warmth and life. James noticed that Ethan's eyes shone with happiness, a stark contrast to the fear he had felt when James first found him. Over the next few hours, James spent time with Ethan in the garden, playing simple games, drawing, and talking about the city, school, and friends. Mr. Thompson observed quietly, occasionally joining in the conversation. He could see the genuine connection between James and his son, and it was clear to him that this bond was based on trust, care, and shared experiences, not wealth or status. James also noticed how Ethan's father treated him with respect and kindness. There was no sense of superiority or obligation, only gratitude and warmth. It was a rare experience for James, who had lived most of his life in modest circumstances, and he felt both humbled and honored by the gesture. After a while, Mr. Thompson invited James to sit down with him privately. "James, I want you to know that your presence in Ethan's life, and ours, has made a difference we can't fully explain," he said sincerely. "Your kindness has reminded us that people like you, people who act with heart and integrity, truly make the world better." James shook his head softly. "I didn't do anything extraordinary. I just helped a scared child find safety." "That's all?" "No," Mr. Thompson replied firmly. "You did much more than that. You gave Ethan trust, comfort, and reassurance when he needed it most. You showed him that there are people in the world who care without expecting anything in return. That is extraordinary." James felt a lump in his throat. He had always believed in doing the right thing, quietly and without recognition. But hearing someone acknowledge it so openly touched him in a way he hadn't expected. Over the following weeks, James found that life had subtly shifted. People in his neighborhood and on his bus route spoke to him with new respect. Some knew about the story and referred to him as a man who had made a difference, a small hero in an ordinary world. But what mattered most to James wasn't the recognition. It was knowing that Ethan felt safe, happy, and cared for. Ethan continued to visit James regularly. Each visit strengthened their bond, not through grand gestures but through shared experiences, playing games, talking about their day, and laughing together. James saw the boy grow more confident, more curious and more trusting, not just in him, but in the world around him. One evening, as James walked home after his bus shift, he reflected on how much that single day had changed his life. It had begun as a simple act of kindness, helping a lost child, but it had grown into something far deeper. He realized that even ordinary people could create extraordinary impacts through patience, care, and empathy. James also noticed that he had changed in subtle ways. He felt a renewed sense of purpose in his work. Every passenger he greeted, every child he helped, every smile he shared became part of a larger understanding that human connection mattered more than any routine or task. Life, he realized, was not measured in material wealth or status, but in the care and attention we give to one another. One afternoon, Ethan ran up to James as he was about to start his bus route. "James, look what I drew," the boy exclaimed, holding up a colorful drawing of the two of them on the bus, surrounded by smiling passengers. James smiled broadly. "That's amazing, Ethan." "You captured our day perfectly," Ethan beamed. "I like drawing with you. You make it fun." James felt a warmth in his heart. It wasn't about praise or admiration. It was the trust, the laughter, and the shared moments that mattered most. This was a bond that transcended age, background, and circumstances. As the city moved around him, James understood that his life had been forever enriched by that day. The simple act of helping a lost child had grown into a lifelong connection, not just with Ethan, but with his family as well. It reminded him that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the largest impact. In the months that followed, James continued to drive his bus, interact with passengers, and live his life with the same quiet humility he always had. But now he carried with him a profound sense of meaning. Every time he thought of Ethan, he remembered the trust and courage in the boy's eyes, and the knowledge that he had made a difference that mattered. One evening, as James finished his route and watched the sun set over the city, he felt a deep sense of peace. He knew that the day he had met Ethan had changed all their lives. The boy had found safety, trust, and friendship. Ethan's father had learned the value of humility and human kindness. And James had discovered the extraordinary power of a simple, selfless act. The city continued to buzz with life, but in James's heart, there was a quiet satisfaction. He had learned that even ordinary people could touch lives in remarkable ways. He had learned that trust, care, and compassion were the true measures of a person. And he had learned that sometimes, the most unexpected encounters could leave the deepest impact, creating bonds that would last a lifetime. Ethan's laughter, his trust, and his small gestures of affection were constant reminders of that day, and James treasured every moment of their friendship. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about connection, care, and the simple knowledge that he had made a difference in someone's life, a difference that would ripple through time in ways he could never fully know. And as James walked home that evening, with the city lights glowing around him and the hum of life all around, he smiled quietly. The world was big, busy, and sometimes chaotic, but it was also full of moments of kindness, trust, and human connection, and he had been part of one of the most important moments of all. James knew that life would continue, that the city would remain busy, and that people would still face challenges and fears. But he also knew that no matter what, the lessons of that day, the power of patience, empathy, and selfless care, would stay with him forever. And perhaps in small, unseen ways, they would continue to shape the lives of others as well. In the end, it was not wealth, fame, or recognition that mattered. It was the simple act of being there for someone when they needed it most. And in that, James had found a richness far greater than anything he had ever imagined.